The King of Elfland's Daughter by Lord Dunsay. Part 11. Chapter 22. Orion appoints a whip. And many times again, while the winter wore away, Orion went back again with his hounds to that wonderful boundary and waited there while the earthly twilight faded, and sometimes saw the unicorns come through craftily, silently, when our fields were still, great beautiful shapes of white. But he brought back no more horns to the castle of Earl, nor hunted again across the fields we know, for the unicorns, when they came, moved into our fields no more than a few bare paces, and Orion was not able to cut one off again. Once, when he tried, he nearly lost all his hounds, some being already within the boundary when he beat them back with his whip. Another 2 yards, and the sound of his earthly horn could never more have reached them. It was this that taught him that for all the power that he had over his hounds, and even though in that power was something of magic, yet one man without help could not hunt hounds so near to that edge over which if one should stray it would be lost forever. After this, Orion watched the lads at their games in evenings at Earl, till he had marked 3 that in speed and strength seemed to excel the rest. And 2 of these he chose to be whippers in. He went to the cottage of one of them when the games were over, just as the lights were lit, a tall lad with great speed of limb. The lad and his mother were there, and both rose from the table as the father opened the door and Orion came in. And cheerily Orion asked the lad if he would come with the hounds and carry a whip and prevent any from straying. And a silence fell. All knew that Orion hunted strange beasts and took his hounds to strange places. None there had ever stepped beyond the fields that we know. The lad feared to pass beyond them. His parents were full loth to let him go. At length the silence was broken by excuses and muttered sentences and unfinished things, and Orion saw that the lad would not come. He went then to the house of the other. There too the candles were lit and the table spread. There were 2 old women there and the lad at their supper, and to them Orion told how he would need a whipper in, and asked the lad to come. Their fear in the house was more marked. The old woman cried out together that the lad was too young and that he could not run so well as he used to, that he was not worthy of such a great honour and that dogs would never trust him, and much more than this they said till they became incoherent. Orion left them and went to the house of the third. It was the same here. The elders had desired magic for Earl, but the actual touch of it, or the mere thought of it, perturbed the folks in the cottages. None would spare their sons to go whither they knew not, or to have dealings with things that rumour, like a large and sinister shadow, had so grimly magnified in the hamlet of Earl. So Orion went alone with his hounds when he took them up from the valley, and went eastward over the fields where the earth's folk would not go. It was late in the month of March, and Orion slept in his tower, when there came up to him from far below, shrill and clear in the early morning, the sound of his peacocks calling. The bleat of a sheep far up on the downs came to wake him too, and cocks were crowing clamorously, for spring was singing through the sunny air. He rose and went to his hounds, and soon early labourers saw him go up the steep side of the valley with all his hounds behind him, tan patches against the green. And so he passed over the fields we know, and soon he was come before the sun had set to that strip of land from which all men turned away. Where westward stood men's houses among fields of fat brown clay, and eastward the elfin mountains shone over the boundary of twilight. He went with his hounds along the last edge, down to the boundary, and no sooner had he come there than he saw a fox quite close slip out of the twilight between earth and Elfland, and run a few yards along the edge of our fields, and then slip back again. And of this Orion thought nothing, for it is the way of the fox thus to hunt the edge of Elfland and return again to our fields. It is thus that he brings us something of which none of our cities guess. But soon the fox appeared again out of the twilight, and ran a little way, and was back in the luminous barrier once more. Then Orion watched to see what the fox was doing, and yet again it appeared in the field we know, and then dodged back into the twilight. And the hounds watched too, and showed no longing to hunt it, for they had tasted fabulous blood. Orion walked along beside the twilight in the direction in which the fox was going, with his curiosity growing the more that the fox dodged in and out of our fields. The hounds followed him slowly, and soon lost their interest in what the fox was doing. And all at once the curious thing was explained, for Luraloo all of a sudden skipped through the twilight, and that troll appeared in our fields. It was with him that the fox was playing. "A man," said Luraloo, aloud to himself, or to his comrade the fox, speaking in troll talk. And all at once Orion remembered the troll that had come to his nursery, when, with this little charm against time, and had leaped from shelf to shelf and across the ceiling, and enraged Zero-Onderel, who had feared for her crockery. "The troll," he said, also in troll talk, for his mother had murmured to him as a child when she told him tales of trolls and their age-old songs. "Who is it, this that knows troll talk?" said Luraloo. And Orion told his name, and this meant nothing to Luraloo, but he squatted down and rummaged a little while in what answers in trolls to our memory, and during his ransacking of much trivial remembrance that had eluded the destruction of time in the fields we know, and the listless apathy of unchanging ages in Elfland, he came all at once on his remembrance of Earl, and looked at Orion again and began to cogitate. And at the same moment Orion told the troll the august name of his mother. At once Luraloo made what is known amongst the trolls of Elfland as the abasement of the 5 points. That is to say, he bowed himself to the ground on his 2 knees, his 2 hands and his forehead. Then he sprang up again with a high leap into the air, for reverence rested not on his spirits long. "What are you doing in men's fields?" said Orion. "Playing," said Luraloo. "What do you do in Elfland?" "Watch time," said Luraloo. "That would not amuse me," said Orion. "You've never done it," said Luraloo. "You cannot watch time in the fields of men." "Why not?" asked Orion. "It moves too fast." Orion pondered a while on this, but could not make anything of it, because, never having gone from the fields we know, he knew only one pace of time, and so had no means of comparison. "How many years have gone over you," asked the troll, "since we spoke in Earl?" "Years?" said Orion. 100, guessed the troll. "Nearly 12, said Orion. "And you?" "It is still today," said the troll. And Orion would not speak any more of time, for he cared not for the discussion of a subject which he appeared to know less than a common troll. "Will you carry a whip," he said, "and run with my hounds when we hunt the unicorns over the fields we know?" Luraloo looked searchingly at the hounds, watching their brown eyes. The hounds turned doubtful noses towards the troll and sniffed inquiringly. "They are dogs," said the troll, as though that were against them. "Yet they have pleasant thoughts." "You will carry the whip then," said Orion. Yes, yes," said the troll. So Orion gave him his own whip there and then, and blew his horn and went away from the twilight, and told Luraloo to keep the hounds together and to bring them on behind him. And the hounds were uneasy at the sight of the troll, and sniffed again, but could not make him human, and were loth to obey a creature no larger than them. They ran up to him through curiosity, and ran away in disgust, and straggled through disobedience. But the boundless resources of that nimble troll were not thus easily thwarted, and the whip went suddenly up, looking 3 times as large in that tiny hand, and the lash flew forward and cracked on the top of a hound's nose. The hound yelped, then looked astonished, and the rest were uneasy still. They must have thought it an accident, but again the lash shot forwards and cracked on another nose tip, and the hounds saw that it was not chance that guided those stinging shots, but deadly unerring eye. And from that time they reverenced Luraloo, although he never smelt human. So went Orion and his pack of hounds in the late evening homewards, and no sheepdog kept the flock on wolf-haunted wold safer or closer than Luraloo kept the pack. He was on each flank or behind them, wherever a straggler was, and could leap right over the pack from side to side. And the pale blue elfin mountains faded from view before Orion had gone from the frontier as much as 100 paces, for their gloomless peaks were hid by the earthly darkness that was deepening wide over the fields we know. Homeward they went, and soon there appeared above them the wandering multitude of our earth-seen stars. Luraloo now and then looked up to marvel at them, as we have all done at some time, but for the most part he fixed his attention on the hounds, for now that he was in earthly fields he was concerned with the things of earth. And never one hound loitered but that Luraloo's whip would touch him with its tiny explosion, perhaps on the tip of its tail, scattering a little dust of fragments of hair and whipcord, and the hound would yelp and run to the others, and all the pack would know that one another of these unerring shots had gone home. A certain grace with a whip, a certain sureness of aim, comes when a life is devoted to the carrying of a whip amongst hounds. Comes, say, in 20 years, and sometimes it runs in families, and that is better than years of practice. But neither years of practice nor the want of the whip in the blood can give the certain aim that one thing can, and that one thing is magic. The hurl of the lash, as immediate as the sudden turn of an eye, its flash to a chosen spot as direct as sight, were not of this earth, and though the cracks of that whip might have seemed to passing men to be no more than the work of an earthly huntsman, yet not a hound but knew that there was in it more than this, a thing from beyond our fields. There was a touch of dawn in the sky when Orion saw again the village of Earl, sending up pillars of smoke from early fires below him, and came with his hounds and his new whipper in, down the side of the valley. Early windows winked at him as he went down the street, and came in the silence and chilled the empty kennels. And when the hounds were all curled up on their straw, he found a place for Luraloo, a mouldering loft in which were sacks and a few heaps of hay. From a pigeon loft just beyond it, some of the pigeons had strayed and dwelt all along the rafters. There Orion left Luraloo, who went to his tower cold with the want of sleep and food, and weary as he would not have been if he had found a unicorn, but the noise of the troll's chatter when he had found him on the frontier had made it useless to watch for those wary beasts that evening. Orion slept, but the troll in the mouldering loft sat long on his bundle of hay, observing the ways of time. He saw through cracks in old shutters the stars go moving by. He saw them pale, he saw the other light spread, he saw the wonder of sunrise. He felt the gloom of the loft all full of the coo of pigeons. He watched their restless ways. He heard wild birds stir in near elms, and men abroad in the morning, and horses and carts and cows, and everything changing as the morning grew. A land of change! The decay of the boards in the loft, and the moss outside on the mortar, and old lumber mouldering away, all seemed to tell the same story. Change, and nothing abiding. He thought of the age-old calm that held the beauty of Elfland, and then he thought of the tribe of trolls he had left, wondering what they would think of the ways of earth. And the pigeons were suddenly terrified by wild peals of Luraloo's laughter. Chapter 13. Luraloo watches the restlessness of earth. As the day wore on and still Orion slept heavily, and even the hounds lay silent in their kennels, a little way off, and the coming and going of men and carts below had nothing to do with the troll, Luraloo began to feel lonely. So thick are the brown trolls in the dells they inhabit that none feels lonely there. They sit there, silent, enjoying the beauty of Elfland or their own impudent thoughts, or at rare moments when Elfland is stirred from its deep natural calm, their laughter floods the dells. They were no more lonely than rabbits are, but in all the fields of earth there was only one troll, and that troll felt lonely. The door of the pigeon loft was open some 10 feet from the door of the hayloft, and some 6 feet higher. A ladder led to the hayloft, clamped to the wall with iron, but nothing at all communicated with the pigeon loft, lest cats should go that way. From it came the murmur of abundant life, which attracted the lonely troll. The jump from door to door was nothing to him, and he landed in a pigeon loft in his usual attire, with a look of impudent welcome upon his face. But the pigeons poured away on a roar of wings through their windows, and the troll was still lonely. He liked the pigeon loft as soon as he looked at it. He liked the signs that he saw of teeming life, the 100 little houses of slate and plaster, the myriad feathers and the musty smell. He liked the age-old ease of the sleepy loft and the huge spider webs that draped the corners, holding years and years of dust. He did not know what cobwebs were, never having seen them in Elfland, but he admired their workmanship. The age of the pigeon loft that had filled the corners with cobwebs and broken patches of plaster away from the wall, shooing ruddy bricks beneath, and laid bare the lathes in the roof, and even the slates beyond, gave to the dreamy place an air not unlike the calm of Elfland, but below it and all around Luraloo noticed the restlessness of earth. Even the sunlight through the little ventilation holes that shone on the wall moved. Presently there came a roar of the pigeons' returning wings and the crash of their feet on the slate roof above him, but they did not yet come in again to their homes. He saw the shadow of this roof cast on another roof below him, and the restless shadows of the pigeons along the edge. He observed the grey lichen covering most of the lower roof, and the next round patches of newer yellow lichen on the shapeless mass of the grey. He heard a duck call out slowly 6 or 7 times. He heard a man come into a stable below him and lead a horse away. A hound woke and cried out. Some jackdaws, disturbed from some tower, passed over high in the air with boisterous voices. He saw big clouds go hurrying along the tops of far hills. He heard a wild pigeon call from a neighbouring tree. Some went by talking, and ever after a while he perceived to his astonishment that he had no leisure to notice on his own previous visit to Earl that even the shadows of houses moved, for he saw that the shadow of the roof under which he had sat had moved a little on the roof below, over the grey and yellow lichen. Perpetual movement and perpetual change! He contrasted it, in wonder, with the deep calm of his home, where the movement moved more slowly than the shadows of houses here, and did not pass until all the content with which a moment is stored had been drawn from it by every creature in Elfland. And then, with a whirring and whining of wings, the pigeons began to come back. They came from the tops of the battlements of the highest tower of Earl, on which they had sheltered a while, feeling guarded by its great height and its hoary age from this strange new thing that they feared. They came back and sat on the sills of their little windows and looked in with one eye at the troll. Some were all white, but the grey ones had rainbow-coloured necks and were scarce less lovely than those colours that made the splendour of Elfland. And Lureloo, as they watched him suspiciously, where he sat in a corner, longed for their dainty companionship. And, when these restless children of a restless air and earth would still not enter, he tried to soothe them with the restlessness to which they were accustomed, and in which he believed all folk that dwelt in our fields delighted. He leapt up suddenly. He sprang on at a slate-built house for a pigeon high on the wall. He darted across to the next wall and back to the floor. But there was an outcry of wings and the pigeons were gone. And gradually he learned that pigeons preferred stillness. Their wings roared back soon to the roof. Their feet thumped and clicked on the slates again, but not for long did they return to their homes, and the lonely troll looked out their windows, observing the ways of earth. He saw a water wagtail light on the roof below him. He watched it until it went, and then 2 sparrows came to some corn that had been dropped on the ground. He noticed them too. Each was an entirely new genus to the troll, and he showed no more interest as he watched every movement of the sparrows than should we if we met with an utterly unknown bird. When the sparrows were gone, the ducks quacked again so deliberately that another 10 minutes passed while Lureloo tried to interpret what it was saying, and although he desisted then because of other interests attracted him, he felt sure it was something important. Then the jackdaws tumbled by again, but their voices sounded frivolous, and Lureloo did not give them much attention. To the pigeons on the roof that would not come home he listened long, not trying to interpret what they were saying, yet satisfied with the case as the pigeons put it, feeling that they told the story of life, and that all was well, and he felt, as he listened to the low talk of the pigeons, that earth must have been going on for a long time. Beyond the roofs, the tall trees rose up, leafless except for evergreen oaks and some laurels and pines and yews and the ivy that climbed up trunks. But the buds of the beech were getting ready to burst, and the sunlight glittered and flashed on the buds and leaves, and the ivy and laurel shone. A breeze passed by, and some smoke drifted from some near chimney. Far away, Lureloo saw a huge grey wall of stone that circled a garden, all asleep in the sun. And clear in the sunlight he saw a butterfly sail by and swoop when it came to the garden. And then he saw 2 peacocks go slowly past. He saw the shadows of the roof darkening the lower part of the shining trees. He heard a cock crow somewhere, and a hound spoke out again. And then a sudden shower rained on the roofs, and at once the pigeons wanted to come home. They alighted outside their little windows again and all looked sideways at the troll. Lureloo kept very still this time, and after a while the pigeons, though they saw that he was by no means one of themselves, agreed that he did not belong to the tribe of cat, and returned at last to the street of their tiny houses, and there continued their curious age-old tale. And Lureloo longed to repay them with curious tales of the trolls, the treasured legends of Elfland, but found that he could not make them understand troll talk. So he sat and listened to them talking, till it seemed to him they were trying to lull the restlessness of earth, and thought that they might by drowsy incantation be putting some spell against time, through which it could not come to harm these nests, for the power of time was not made clear to him yet, and he knew not yet that nothing in our fields has the strength to hold out against time. The very nests of the pigeons were built on the ruins of old nests, on a solid layer of crumbled things that time had made in the pigeon loft, as outside it the strata are made from the ruins of hills. So vast and ceaseless a ruin was not yet clear to the troll, for his sharp understanding had only been meant to guide him through the lull and the calm of Elfland, and he busied himself with a tinier consideration. For seeing that the pigeons seemed now amicable, he leapt back to his hayloft and returned with a bundle of hay, which he put down in a corner to make himself comfortable there. When the pigeons saw all this movement, they looked at him sideways again, jerking their necks queerly, but in the end decided to accept the troll as a lodger, and he curled up on his hay and listened to the history of earth, which he believed the tale of the pigeons to be, though he did not know their language. But the day wore on, and hunger came to the troll, far sooner than it ever did in Elfland, where, even when he was hungry, he had no more to do than to reach up and take the berries that hung low from trees that grew in the forest that bordered the dells of the trolls. And because the trolls eat them whenever hunger comes on them, which it rarely does, that these curious fruits are called troll berries. He leapt now from the pigeon loft and scampered abroad, looking all around for troll berries, and there were no berries at all, for there is but one season for berries, as we know well. It is one of the tricks of time. But that all berries on earth should pass away for a period was to the troll too astounding to be comprehended at all. He was all among farm buildings, and presently he saw a rat humping himself slowly along a dark shed. He knew nothing of rat talk, but it is a curious thing that when any two folk are after the same thing, each somehow knows what the other is after, at once, as soon as he sees him. We are all partially blind to other folks' occupations, but when we meet anyone engaged in our own pursuit, then somehow we soon seem to know without being told. And the moment that Luraloo saw the rat in the shed, he seemed to know that it was looking for food. So he followed the rat quietly, and soon the rat came up to a sack of oats, and to open that took him no longer than it does to shell a row of peas, and soon he was eating the oats. "Are they good?" said the troll in troll talk. The rat looked at him dubiously, noting his resemblance to man, and on the other hand his unlikeness to dogs. But on the whole the rat was dissatisfied, and after a long look turned away in silence and went out of the shed. Then Luraloo ate the oats and found that they were good. When he had enough oats, the troll returned to the pigeon loft and sat a long while there at one of the little windows looking out across the roofs at the strange new ways of time. And the shadow upon the trees went higher, and the glitter was gone from the laurels and all the lower leaves. And then the light of the ivy leaves and the holm oaks turned from silvery to pale gold, and the shadow went higher still, all the world full of change. An old man with a narrow long white beard came slowly to the kennels and opened the door and went in and fed the hounds with meat that he brought from a shed. All the evening rang with the hounds' outcry, and presently the old man came out again, and his slow departure seemed to the watchful troll yet more of the restlessness of earth. And then a man came slowly leading a horse to the stable below the pigeon loft, and went away again and left the horse eating. The shadows were higher now on walls and roofs and trees. Only the tree-tops and the tip of the high belfry had the light any longer. The ruddy buds on the high beeches were glowing now like dull rubies, and a great serenity came in the pale blue sky, and small clouds leisurely floating there turned to a flaming orange, past which the rooks went homeward to some clump of trees under the downs. It was a peaceful scene, and yet to the troll, as he watched in the musty loft amongst generations of feathers, the noise of the rooks and their multitudes thronging the sky, the dull continuous sound of the horse eating, the leisurely sound now and then of homeward feet, and the slow shutting of gates, seemed to be proof that nothing ever rested in all the fields we know, and the sleepy lazy village that dreamed in the Vale of Earl, and that knew no more of other lands than the folks knew of its story, seemed to that simple troll to be a vortex of restlessness. And now the sunlight was gone from the highest places, and a moon a few days old was shining over the pigeon loft, out of sight of Luraloo's window, but filling the air with a strange new tint. And all these changes bewildered him, so that he thought a while of returning to Elfland. But the whim came again to his mind to astonish the other trolls, and while this whim was on him, he slipped down from the loft and went to find Orion. End of part 11. If you have been enjoying this audiobook, please take the time to subscribe. It would really help the station. If you could also like or leave a comment or share this station with other friends, that would be great. Thank you.